Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Du, and I'm a student at UC San Diego, CADA. And since manners, the topic of manners was mentioned very frequently at the keynote, I'm here to present my work on measuring manners. So this material is actually adapted from a paper we published last year at the Internet Measurement Conference. And I have to thank my co-authors from Georgia Tech, Stanford, and Internet Initiative Japan. So first of all, what is MANRS? And the MANRS initiative, it stands for Mutually Agreed Norms on Routing Security. And it is an initiative launched by operators in 2014. And they provide crucial fixes to reduce the most common routing threats according to MANRS description. So what are the routing threats? It's BGP hijacking, which has been frequently brought up in the previous talks. And we see two examples here in 2022 that BGP hijacking can cost their victims a lot of monetary loss. And in these cases, they are stealing cryptocurrency, which is a more recent use of BGP hijacking. But the problem itself has been here for decades. So of course, there are existing infrastructure exist, sort of trying to prevent BGP hijacking. And those are routing databases, one of them being the Internet Routing Registry. It was from 1998, so it's pretty old. And the example RADB here is the largest IRR database. I think right now there are about more than 20 of them, and all organized, maintained by different organizations. And there's also RPKI, thanks to the previous speakers. So the 5 RIRs manage RPKI. So all these infrastructure exist, but BGP hijacking is still a problem. So that is because routing security is a collective action problem, meaning that everyone needs to adopt routing security practices before the whole problem is going to get better. And an example or a counterexample here is we have two ISPs. If one of them doesn't do route validation, the attacker can still send their malicious announcement through ISP1, in this case, no validation, to the rest of the internet. And ISP1 doesn't want to do route validation for maybe it costs money for them to do it. So overall, networks may have misaligned incentive to implement these practices, and manners exist to create a community for networks to encourage each other to adopt routing security practices. And in our study, we focused on the manners program for network operators and cloud providers, and two of the actions, one being you have to register your intended BGP announcements in IRR or RPKI. So registration is first. You need to give information. And second is you need to use information from the IRR or RPKI to do route filtering. That's when hijacks actually gets removed. So the overall question is, how effective is the Manners initiative? And we answer this question by dividing it into two smaller questions. One is we look at who's in Manners. So how has their participation grown over the past 6 years? And briefly, we found that LACNIC has the most Manners ASs, and that's denoted in the red bars. So we see a big jump between 2019 and 2020. And that's because in 2020, 164 new Manners ASs were from Brazil due to an outreach effort by nic.br. And so this is from the metric if you look at the number of ASs spread across the 5 RIRs. So what about address space? What we see is that ARIN has the most address space, meaning that the ASs originating these address spaces, they were registered in ARIN. So as in the blue bar, we can see that ARIN has the most address space, but we also noticed that the green bar increased a lot in 2020, and that's because of one single network, China Telecom, joined Manners in 2020. And compared to the previous plot, there was a big red bar, but it doesn't show on this one. And that's because the LACNIC ASs, as shown earlier, they announce little address space in BGP. Most of the ASs that in MANRS from LACNIC are very small. So overall, MANRS participation has grown, but in which region does MANRS have the most impact differs when you look at different metrics. And to look at the second question, are the MANRS participants actually properly implementing the practices they promised to implement? So we found that yes, most of the MANRS ASs are conformant to the required actions. For registering intended announcements in IRR and RPKI, we found that 95% of them are conformant. And to filter incorrect customer announcements, 83% of the MANRS ASs are conformant. And this is based on 1 day of BGP data. And so BGP is dynamic. So what happens when we look across multiple months? So for the ASs that are conformant from the previous slide, we backtrack for 3 months. So we look between February and May 2022, and we found that 94% of the MANRS ASs who were conformant, they actually stayed conformant over this 3 months. And another observation we made is that MANRS networks, when you compare them to non-MANRS networks, they're more likely to keep the routing database records up to date, either in the IRR or RPKI. And so in general, that's good. We also found that some of the MANRS ASs did not use RPKI, because according to MANRS requirement, you can be conformant as long as you register either in IRR or RPKI. So we found that 148, which is 19% of the overall around 800 MANRS ASs at that time, they only registered in the IRR, meaning that they didn't use RPKI. So showing that potentially there could be room for improvement. I believe there's going to be a talk tomorrow about the nuances between IRR and why you should use RPK instead. So to summarize, is MANRS overall effective? Yes, we found a significant increase in the participation over the past 6 years. And for the participants in MANRS as of 2022, they were conformant to the required MANRS practices, 83% of them. But there's still room for improvement because the 17% that were not conformant, a lot of them are very large transit providers. We understand that they have a lot of prefixes to manage, but I guess that suggests room for improvement. And finally, a question for the community or the MANRS people would be, should MANRS encourage using RPKI over IRR in the future? So making their requirements stricter in this case. So thank you.